YouTube, how's it going everyone? It's a cozy day in December, loading up some kovaaks. So today's topic is going to be form isolation. So everything from your fingertips up to your shoulder. We're going to talk about kind of basic ways that we can recognize what's being used within our aim. So let's start from the fingertips. Let's search here, Clover Raw Control. Now, if you played the Visco's benchmarks, you'll know that this is in the fingertip section. This one here, Clover Raw Control, easy 80% speed. But especially if we look at the main version of Clover Raw Control, we can see something about this scenario that's really cool. You see how small this dot is. So if we were to look inside the profile here for what this dot is, it's actually not that small. I mean, it's kind of small, but what makes it feel like that is our FOV. So let's say that we go here to something crazy, 40 FOV. So if we look at what we just modified here with the FOV, bringing ourselves closer to this, barrier here on the edge, we can see that the dot is actually quite a bit bigger than it appears. It's a good amount bigger than my crosshair. Not so crazy to track. So going back here to the main version with this far FOV, you can see how a lot of this is going to be very wrist and fingertip heavy. Of course, I could play this scenario on 150 cm, which is just stupid. And all of these sweeps have to come from my arm and shoulder, right? But even still, I'm using a lot of my wrist and, a little bit of my fingertips. But we can play this one on a range from like 7 all the way to something like 21. And that's going to help us especially blend our wrist and our fingertips and put most of the emphasis on our fingertips. And so, even if this is really hard to start with, you can still play the Visco's benchmark version on the 7 to 21, and you can really work on your fingertip aim. I don't know why my workshop's loading so slow. So you can see this one is a slower, bigger version, but it's going to accomplish the same thing where we're far away and we're working on blending our fingertips with our wrist aim. So one last thing, for me in particular, the way I aim, even when I'm moving my mouse just a small amount, my shoulder, I can actually feel being involved in this process. I can feel, my elbow a little bit. I can feel my forearm, despite the fact that a majority of this comes from my wrist and fingertips. The other parts of my aim do play a process. So let's say that we wanted to eliminate those parts a little bit further, and we wanted to really just focus on our fingertips in particular. So one thing I can do to further isolate from my fingertips is I can just plant my forearm here on the table. So that what that's going to do is it's going to eliminate like my elbow and my shoulder from cheating and wobbling. I have a little bit of forearm give in any direction, but I'm eliminating most of my arm by planting it. The other thing is with the squeeze from the sides. If I squeeze tighter the sides of my mouse, especially just like using my pinky and my thumb, the tighter I squeeze, the more there's tension in my wrist, the more my wrist becomes tighter, excuse me. So with a tight wrist and our forearm planted, it puts a lot of strain back into our fingertips. And so I can kind of make a better mind-muscle connection that, yeah, my fingertips are in charge of completing these smaller micro adjustments. Oops, I just completed a run there. I'm going to be at the bottom. Number 24,000. But you can see how, working this scenario, we can do things to put more emphasis and increase our mind-muscle connection with our fingertips. So I'm suggesting squeeze the sides of your mouse a little bit tighter and plant your forearm to kind of eliminate a lot of the process of your arm helping there. Okay, that was a bit of a long-winded explanation, but let's talk about your wrist. One scenario you may be familiar with is smooth your wrist. So if I'm not mistaken, one of the first scenarios of Smooth Your Wrist was from Devon DTV. This one has like 100,000 players. So if we spawn into this test, we'll see there's glass barriers here on either side, so your accuracy in the center is what's important. This sweep of the long motion here in the center. But I want to point something out to you. If I scroll up to the top, and I look at some of these scores here, a lot of people are playing on like 120, some people playing on like 215. The scenario is smooth your wrist, but a lot of people are aiming with their arm, their shoulder, really kind of cheating this process due to the nature of it being, a competitive kovaaks scenario. Okay, so with Smooth Your Wrist or SYW, there's some variants that I really like. They're made by Robin Wobbin, so if we search Wobbin SYW, four of these are going to pull up. Robin made these and uploaded these for me for my TSK routine, so huge shout out to Robin Wobbin. She's like one of the best creators still creating here on kovaaks, and all the stuff that she's been putting out is really, really cool. So massive props to her and thanks to her again for these. But what I've done is I've gone ahead and downloaded each of these, and we can look these up really quick. So it may be hard to read from my webcam, but if we unpack this first one, this is the extra thin variant, a bigger version of the extra thin. And we can see that the box radius is 6.25, so very small. And then we can see this one here called level 4. This is a small variant of the regular size task, but even that small variant, that 10.5, is bigger than the big variant for the thin. So the point of me showing you any of that is all four of these have gradually decreasing size. So from level 4 extra thin all the way up to level 2 of the regular, these are varying in size. You can see this one level 2 here is going to be a big version, so I would argue that this is great for working on your overall smoothness. It's less intensive on your tension or your precision, so it's also an opportunity to work a little bit on your wrist speed matching. And then if we go all the way down here to this level 4, this is like needle size. It's tiny, so you have to be extra precise here, extra, extra thin. So just like the other Smooth Your Wrist versions, we could practice this. That one person was playing at 220. We could practice our shoulder and arm aim here, playing on 220. Like, it's pretty crazy to keep up with, but you're perfectly in the center there if you have a big mouse pad. But since we're trying to isolate for your wrist, I have a suggestion here. I think you can go in the range of like 45 cm here. And what we'll do is, just like the last exercise, we're going to plant our forearm. Make sure that your forearm is making contact with your pad. And then with your left hand, this time, I want you to hold the top of your forearm down. So it's just your wrist and your fingertips here working. See how much my wrist can flex when I do this. So as we play, I want you to feel the flex of your wrist and go all the way, track all the way through the glass. Get the full range of motion that you can here. And so for me, I have a little bit left in the tank, right? I can go all the way out in either direction. So for me, even though I said 45, I can practice this at 70 and kind of accomplish the same thing. See, go all the way out. You feel full flex on your wrist. So let me show you what happens when you don't do this, right? Let's say that you want to just keep your forearm planted here, right? And, I'll just keep my forearm down. You accomplish something quite similar, but you can actually feel your shoulder and your arm working a little bit. It's almost impossible to isolate completely for your wrist when you're not holding your, top of your forearm down, because your arm wants to cheat. Okay, so last thing that I'm going to say with this, but be very careful with your wrist. Your wrist is very delicate. If you hurt yourself with your wrist, it's very hard to recover. So don't overdo this. Listen to your body. But also, there is a YouTube channel called 1HP that has some excellent exercises for strengthening either side of your wrist, kind of supporting through your arm, talking about like your muscle, your tendons, how you can, build your wrist health. I definitely want to encourage you to be proactive with your wrist rather than reactive with pain. Really be intentional about supporting your wrist health overall. One more thing with this scenario: in most cases with these longer sweeping motions like this, you want to feel a good squeeze from the side of your mouse for a bit of stability. In this very specific case, however, I want to remind you, when you squeeze the sides of your mouse more, it makes your wrist a little bit tighter. And in this case, where we're trying to flex through this full range of motion, I think this is a bad thing. So just for this exercise, I think you can take a little bit off of your squeeze from the sides and try to compensate a little bit with your tension instead downwards into the pad. Try to find the balance of what works best for you with your squeeze versus your downwards force so that you can find the highest accuracy while also still maintaining that flex of your wrist and testing what this is designed to test. Okay, so the next topic here is going to be about your arm in general. So mostly like your forearm, your elbow, and a little bit of your shoulder. I think a great way to demonstrate this is PGT Intermediate, bot number 2, and we're going to play this on 60 CM360. So when we load this up, I want to point something out here. This takeoff right here, this point where the bot launches downwards, I want you to feel how your shoulder can initiate the motion here. Feel how you can find a burst of tension from your shoulder off of this launch right here. It should come from your shoulder. Then here, as the bot goes down, goes into a bounce, we can feel that the tension, especially as it comes off of the bounce here. Let me show you this again. As this jumps off of the bounce right here, you can feel tension flow into your forearm. So down your shoulder into kind of your forearm. Then again here, so we feel that tension into your forearm, and then now your wrist should flex here. In this right here where the bot changes direction, you should feel your wrist flex. Okay, I just modified the time scale, make this a little bit slower to show you. Right there, I felt a burst of tension from my shoulder. Feel tension now in my forearm. Feel how my wrist, look at the cam. My wrist flexed through that adjustment back into the forearm right here at the start. Now I can feel a burst of tension again from my shoulder, going back down to my forearm, wrist flexes. So here, this is 50% speed. I can exaggerate things a little bit further, but that is how the flow of tension works through your arm on an exercise like PGT. This is a precise tracking exercise. Playing at 60 CM360, we're going to put a lot of emphasis on everything through our arm here. So the last thing to talk about here is your shoulder. We just talked about your arm, but your shoulder plays a very important process in these kind of sweeping motions that you'll have both in tracking, but also even in clicking. So I'm going to put my arm in frame here and demonstrate something for you real quick. If I wanted to move my arm and sweep my arm left or right without using my elbow, you see kind of like right or left, you can feel how there's tension in my shoulder to facilitate this, right? Very basic. But, if I'm not moving my elbow, my shoulder is in charge of my left and right sweep. So here, if I put my hand on the mouse, maybe my forearm is making contact with a pad, but if I shrug my shoulder gently, my forearm comes off of the pad and my elbow goes just a little bit higher. I don't want you to chicken wing your elbow where you're just like, crazy hovering it, but a gentle lift of your elbow is good too. So now if I sweep either direction with my mouse, I can still feel that engagement from my shoulder. If we pair this process with a sensitivity like 110, then we go and play something like smoothbot intermediate with long sweeping motions here. Fill a load. We can see how when this takes off, we have a burst of tension from our shoulder, but we follow through this motion largely with our shoulder. Right, and you can still feel the other parts of your aim, right? You can feel your wrist and the direction changes. You can feel like every part of your aim flow just like PGT Bot 2, but it puts so much more emphasis on your shoulder for this sweep across the map. Right, so this 110 is a nice range to play on certain tasks to feel that part of our form. Understand what it's doing. Okay, so we just covered 4 different groups from our fingertips all the way up to our shoulder. But really, what helped us, experiment and understand and feel these different groups were the sensitivities, but also the tasks themselves. Maybe I could play Smoothbot Intermediate here on, 7 CM360, and when I do play this, it's going to be a lot of my fingertips, especially if I have a fingertip grip. That all makes sense. But playing something like Clover Raw Control, you can see just how valuable those fine adjustments are. So playing something at a sensitivity helps, but playing the right thing at that sensitivity really helps you understand, how our muscles and how our groups blend together for one cohesive unit of aim. This video came out to be much longer than I thought it was going to, but I hope it all makes sense and that you guys find it practical for your improvement. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.